So we're going to be reading in Exodus 19, 1 through 18. On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There, Israel encamped before the mountain, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the people of Israel." So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. The second verse, section that we're going to read is 20, verses 1 through 17. And God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth below, or that is in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything else that is your neighbor's." This is the word of the Lord.
Okay, so last year, in preparation for the Exodus series, Paul, Stan, and I, we went to California, you can see here on the back, to spend a weekend learning from Tim Mackey. Learning and listening and really trying to understand this idea behind Exodus. This is the guy behind Bible Project. If you have not discovered Bible Project yet, can I just say that you're missing out, because he has a way of explaining and bringing some of the biblical concepts to life like nobody else. And so we had the honor and privilege to do that, where he unpacked it in a way that it made the whole book come alive. Hopefully, so that then we could come back and hear every Sunday, try to bring a bit of that to you, and sort of, try to have the Exodus show up in such a way that it relates to our life and to our journeys. And so Paul had to fly in, and me instead, we decided to do the road trip route. Both of us actually like driving, so we ended up enjoying it a lot, but even the boring parts. So as we're passing, or as we're driving, we're listening through Exodus, so we're like, this marathon of just let's re-listen it so that it's super fresh in our minds, and listening to some podcasts and whatnot. One of the biggest shifts that came is that as we arrived already, one of the biggest shifts came is that we realized that as Tim was walking through the book, is that you realize that you bring a lot of your own presuppositions and contemporary lenses into the story, and that's why a lot of times it doesn't make sense. That's why we have so many questions. That's why it feels a little bit distant. And one of those is how we think, for example, about the law. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. When you say the law or the law enforcement, it makes you think of what? Police officers or courtroom or a lawsuit or a punishment or a fine or restriction, ordinances, whatnot, right? It feels like when we say the word law that it comes as somewhat of a burden, something that's kind of put on us and is uncomfortable to carry, something that we tolerate when it protects us, but we end up resenting when it gets in our way. And so usually we're thankful when everybody else follows it, but if we're honest, we hate it when it slows us down, whether you're building a house or trying to get somewhere on time or whatever it is, right? Like it frustrates us. And so now back to driving in the car, listening to the podcast and all of that. So we're driving, and I had my very own lesson passing through the Grand Pass, Oregon, this long, empty road, many hours of driving ahead. We're listening through Exodus. The law says speed limit is 70 miles per hour. Well, I might or might not have been driving a little faster. And so lo and behold, in this empty desert land, as it seemed at first, there is a law enforcement officer who was, spotted me from his hiding spot and ended up pulling over and did what the law requires him to do. Just pull over a person, see a violator, give them a citation. And just like that, just that one moment, this guy gave me a ticket that was like all the money that we tried to save by not going on the plane ticket. The ticket itself was more than the conference that we paid for. But here's the limit of the law, because some of you might know that when it comes to law, there are exceptions and clauses and stipulations, and this has to be followed. I mean, just try to read like the Washington Revised State Code, right? Like it's not fun to read, and probably the only time you would be reading it is when you have a ticket and you're thinking about a lawyer. But there's stuff that has to be followed by both defendant and plaintiff, right? The one who's suing and the one who's being sued or standing, the charge. And so when the court date came, the officer didn't show up, thankfully for me, which meant legally the case was dismissed. Now, the fine is gone. The record is clear. I'm super happy. But the law, right, as we understand it, was not so much concerned with the kind of person that I was becoming, right, who would no longer speed in the areas where maybe speeding would put others in danger. It was more of just, if you find your way around the law, then it's fine. You're free to go, right? Like you can go on because this guy didn't show up, and it didn't really have the purpose of the law didn't really change me, right? Other than, of course, I don't want to be in that kind of situation, but it didn't really work on my heart. It didn't really try to transform me. And we think of law in that sense, as if I can get my way around it, as long as I just follow it, keep it to the dot, then I can go on and live my life. This kind of thinking of the law is often the thinking that characterizes our thinking about the laws of God. That like he's a great scorekeeper, and if you could just balance it out somehow by the officer not showing up, and you could be just let go, or by maybe showing that you do all these things, then maybe my score could be kept up. Now, I'll tell you of another law that you might know, and putting on a seatbelt. I knew this was a law. Most of my friends, I remember 2007 through 2009, maybe 2010, were not wearing seatbelts. It was not very cool to wear seatbelts, the community that I grew up in. And so when I became a firefighter, volunteer firefighter for a very short time, for a few years here in Clear Lake, and got to see firsthand what happens to you when you don't wear one, and more than that, when I now had an identity of someone who is concerned with safety and called to model it to others in the community, this one I followed, right? Because, not because I was afraid of getting a citation, but because I saw the goodness behind it. I was convinced about what it really is about. And then it didn't matter if I'm sitting in a car and the driver's not putting on a seatbelt on, I am putting my seatbelt on. And I also thankfully had another friend who was also a firefighter with me. We just both were set on it. And whether other people followed it or not, this is what we decided to do. The law was good. And so today we come to the part that usually brings up a picture of these rules and regulations, do's and don'ts that Joy just read to us, shall nots and shalls. And it could be that we get this kind of picture because we don't pay as much attention as we should to the Exodus story and what it really is all about. that we kind of see the Ten Commandments in isolation. In the introduction to Bearing God's Name, which is written by Dr. Carmen Joy Imes, if you're interested, by the way, to learn more about the Ten Commandments, I couldn't recommend the book more. Today, you will get to see quite a lot of quotes, right, from that book, and so it'll be there at the bottom. You can take a picture of it. But I do recommend the book because it is probably the best exposition we have on Ten Commandments from an evangelical perspective. But in her introduction, she reminds the readers of C.S. Lewis's Narnia's books, and one in particular, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. By the way, if you haven't read those series as well, you're probably not either haven't discovered them or you're not old enough, because at some point it's like you get old enough to where you should read the stories and you're going to be drawn towards them. Somewhere in between, we're become these adults that are just not interested in fictional literature for some reason. Not everybody, but some. And yet there's so much to learn from the way C.S. Lewis paints this fictional world to present the principles. And so if you can read it with your kids even better. We've had a wonderful journey of about, I want to say 5 years, maybe 4 years, going together with the kids through every book. And it's just been a blessing. Anyways, so this is how C.S. Lewis begins The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. He opens the book with a scene where Edmund and Lucy Pevensies, they are upstairs in their cousin Eustace's house, and they're stuck with him for the summer holidays. And they wish, of course, they would be somewhere else, like in Narnia. They've been before. But here they are. And so they're staring at this painting on the wall, and it's one of a ship at sea. And it looks a lot like the Narnian ships that they've seen before. Eustace, their cousin, who hasn't been to Narnia, overhears them talking about it and begins to mock the children for their childish imagination. They're like, look, it looks like just the ones we've seen before. In fact, in his opinion, he thinks that the painting is downright rotten, to quote him. But as children continue to look on the painting, something begins to shift in it. They're all of a sudden, they're like, did you hear that? It feels like the waves are moving. It almost feels like the wind is blowing. And it almost sounds like the waves are lapping against the boat. They can almost smell the air of the sea. And suddenly a splash of seawater comes into the room. And next thing you know, the whole thing starts to just flood the room. And finally, the room is gone, and they find themselves immersed in the picture. They're now in Narnia. And so Dr. Carmen, she writes this. She says, perhaps without meaning to, Lewis demonstrates the nature of Scripture. At first glance, the Bible is only a book telling us of lands and peoples long ago and far away. But like a Narnian painting, as we look more closely, it comes to life and sweeps us into the story. And this is what we get to do every time that we gather here, every Sunday. This is the invitation, is that as we slow down and let our assumptions about the world and life as we know it, put them to the side, every Sunday as we open it up, and if we are open to be challenged by these timeless principles of the one who set the world in motion, then what we discover is that Exodus and the whole of the Bible sets a pattern for how God moves in the world, and specifically how he even moves in your life today. And so finally we're in the middle of the book. This is about the halfway point. Maybe it's not the halfway point of the series, I think, but we're halfway through the book. And so we find ourselves in chapters 19 and 20, where you will see that renewal begins. You maybe have heard me in the beginning said the sort of the flow of how the whole Exodus story unfolds is that there is the creation moment, right? And then there's the enslavement, and then liberation, and final renewal. So today we're going to be between the two, a renewal or liberation and kind of stepping into renewal. And what has happened for the past 18 chapters is that there was a flurry or a storm of activity from years of enslavement, from people crying out to God, to Moses miraculously being saved for a mission that he doesn't even understand, and actually will not step in until he's 90 years old. Most of his life, right, is going to go by, and he hasn't. Just later he steps into the mission until finally he has this life-changing encounter with the Creator of the universe, to the beginning of the rescue operation, which is launched by God through Moses and Aaron. And then we go through the plagues and the Passover and the Red Sea and the bread from heaven and the water from the rock and so on. So all of this has happened in the past 18 chapters. And we've traced our journey from God creating a nation, because remember, this was just a promise to Abraham. one day out of you I will create a nation. Well, they went to Egypt and they flourished, and that was the creation part. And then them being enslaved by Pharaoh, who acts strikingly resembling the snake in the garden, enslaving, oppressing, lying, and bringing darkness into the life of people. And then to God single-handedly challenging and judging the gods of Egypt, providing a way for them towards freedom through Passover. And so now we finally arrive at this chapter 19, and I'm going to read just the beginning of it. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to desert Sinai. And after they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain, and then Moses went up to God. So everything so far has been leading up to this moment. In fact, if you were to look, man, this is not in my notes. I probably shouldn't talk about it. I got a long sermon today, so just buckle up and get your notes and something. I got to tell you this part though. The way you have the 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Give me a break here. So the way they are built is that if you see, there's almost like a mirror of things happening. Exodus 19 is literally at the center of these 5 books. Exodus 19, the meeting with God at Sinai, where he's going to give the 10 commandments, is like the pinnacle of it all. You can trace it from both ends. For example, just like the things that Stan and Paul talked about, that they were on the way to the mountain, they're going to be camping here for a year. After the mountain, the same thing will repeat, as you'll read through Numbers past Leviticus. And so this is the moment where everything has been leading up to. And they are standing in front of this mountain Sinai. And this is not just any mountain. This is the spot, the same mountain where Moses met the great I am. This is the spot from which the whole mission was sent out. And so if you're a careful reader, you might remember from the previous time is that God said that one day, I'm going to bring you back here to this mountain with all the people, and you guys will worship me, and you will know that I'm the one who saved you. And so imagine, here they are now standing before the very place where all of this was set in motion. They're tired, sweaty, probably overwhelmed, overstimulated by now by all of the things that's been happening in the past 2 months. These were some intense months. And here they are at this consequential moment. And now I bet the only thing they really want is finally to walk into their land, to be like, okay, the mountain, we hear from God, and then he's just like, go ahead and walk into the promised land. Let's get to work on making life in this new land as redeemed people as soon as we can. Well, if you read ahead, you know that actually they're going to spend a whole year in front of this mountain. A whole year they're going to be here because God has a plan for them, not because God loves them too much to just send them into the new land. More than that, they're going to spend another 39 years wandering in the desert before entering into the promised land. And as Paul and Stan mentioned previously, the desert, if I'm saying that right, this space in between where they are wandering, it cannot be skipped. It should not be skipped. It is not a wasted time, because this is actually where the renewal begins. This is where God is working and shaping them, so by the time they walk into the new land, they are not bringing the old problems with them. The desert is where the formation happens for the people of Israel, and might I say so, for all of us. It's the in-between place between us arriving in the future that God has for us and from the time that we were liberated. Because God, like I said, loved them too much to free them and then let them walk into the land. And we've said this again, even though they left Egypt, Egypt has not left their hearts. It's not that simple. The fears, the distrust, the slave mentality. Think about it, the patterns of life that they have seen, either done to them or by them. It is all in their neurobiology. They are still 2 weeks old. They were just enslaved. Just 2 weeks old into this whole new freedom thing. They're still functioning and walking and talking like the people who never had freedom. And so the wounds that have been done to them and the sins where they're sinned against them, if not addressed, would soon become the sins done by them. If they're not dealt with, the core, the heart is not reformed, they're going to bring all of that into their new life. And so before they walk into the promised land, God invites them to become the kind of people who are transformed into his likeness, who are like him. He invites them. Notice this will be a language of invitation. He wants them to become people of the promised land. And he says, I will do that to you, but you got to obey me. People who are not just rescued, but renewed. People who no longer think or act like slaves or like the oppressed. And for that to happen, he gives them the law, the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. Now, for most of us, that's counterintuitive because isn't the goal freedom? Didn't he just free them from a bunch of rules that they had to follow? And now he's taken them out into the desert. Already that's stressful enough. And now all of a sudden he's like, well, here's another list of rules, by the way, for you. Because, and I think a response like that, because their response was a little bit different. Our response is because when we think law, again, we think restrictions, we think punishment, we think performance or record keeping, like almost like this legal side of things. But that's exactly why we need to read Exodus 19 prior to reading Exodus 20. Exodus 20 is where your 10 Commandments reside, right? That Joy read today. We need to look at Exodus 19 to understand the purpose of the 10 Commandments. Because before God gives them the law, he gives them the context, the heart behind the law. There are three key realities that I'd like for all of us to see today in order to understand the purpose and the heart behind 10 Commandments. And those are grace, relationship, and mission. Because if you miss these three, commandments will always seem like a burden. They will always seem like something that is imposed on humanity whether they like it or not, instead of an invitation to renewal. So let's take a look at each one closer. Exodus 19, verse 4. God says, you yourselves, this is his beginning of the first things that he addressed to Israelites. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now I got this image. I like this image a lot. I know I showed it before and I'm going to show it again. You see an image of a little bear, right? Like of a cub sitting. But behind it, I don't know if you noticed, there's mama sitting in the cave. Right, and she's just staring you down. Like you almost feel like you want to run up and grab the little cub, but then, yeah, if you look a little bit closer, you change your mind. It doesn't look as cute anymore. And I love this picture, and I think I've seen quite a few other ones as well, where there was like a little bear trying to scare away, like cub to scare away a predator, and he thought he did it all by himself. The cub, it's like a little story, but behind him was the mama bear. I love this image because it reminds us of how sometimes we forget that God is the one carrying us through. Sometimes, man, you feel like, I'm a pastor, I'm a leader, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, right? Like, and look at how I got my stuff all together, like I'm doing all these things. And we forget that anything that we have in our life is from him. You know, like when the boys were little, and sometimes Benjamin, who's thankfully in Sunday school right now, he was like that as well. He'll come over and want to lift something heavy up, and he's like trying to help you out, and you lift the whole thing by yourself, and you carry it, and at the end you sit down, you carry the full weight of it, and he is so happy for his accomplishment because he has carried this giant thing. Papa, look at how I helped you. Right? Look, I moved this whole thing all the way across, and this is somewhat of an image that God is saying here. He's like, I know you feel like you walked through this whole thing, but I carried you on the wings, like you didn't do nothing. All you did is you willingly followed me. And even then, he's not even bringing up all the stuff that you grumbled and didn't like the journey and complained about me and about Moses and about everything else in between, right? This is the grace and tender mercy and the goodness of God. He is the one behind every one of your victories. And he begins with that. He begins with grace, not with law. This is one of the first key realities that we need to understand, is that he is behind every good thing in your life. And this is important because some of us assume that there are 10 commandments, and now we need to learn to live well, and then God will have mercy on our lives and will be loving and kind to us because we fulfilled the 10 commandments, or we fulfilled the law, or we fulfilled the commandments. But in Old Testament and New Testament, grace has always preceded a call to a new life. Grace and mercy is not earned in any way. It is something that God gives prior to you ever being able to give anything back, or to even say whether you want to give anything back or not. He shows up with that grace first and foremost. And so journey from enslavement to liberation is God's work in you, completely his work, only his work. All you have is a response from your side to either go on that journey of liberation or not. And it will never cost you anything on your side. Jesus paid the price. God took care of them in the desert. He is the one who covers the cost of it. You are just to receive the gift of salvation and know that you are secure in him, and you are brought out of slavery into a new life. So God begins not by listing thou shall and thou shall not, but by reminding them what he has already done for them. This is what the context of the law. The law was never a condition for salvation. It was a result or came after redemption. It came after they were already liberated and brought away from danger, and now an invitation to a new life. It's not obey and I will save you, or here's the law, Moses, take this to Egyptians, see if they will obey, or to Egyptians, to take it into Egypt. Tell them if they obey, I will rescue them. But it's I saved you. Now I want to invite you to live as my people. Now that I've saved you, now that I brought you to safety, I want you to become like me. And sadly, just as it was then, so it is now. Many people still live thinking that the Christian message is clean up yourself, fix your habits, prove yourself, and then maybe God will love you and start blessing you and start, bringing good into your life. The core of the good news is clear. Apostle Paul, in the New Testament, he writes, but God demonstrated his own love for us while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Right? And here's the thing. This wasn't a begrudging, I have to die for them, they messed up. This is kind of the thing that I have to do, or a heroic move that everybody would look and say how great God is. I think we try to impose our own picture on it. Like, well, of course we would have done it because for the greater of humanity, like we'll sacrifice ourselves. He does it out of love, deep, genuine, caring, individual and personal to every single person that ever lived or walked the earth. Love. His love is tender and caring for you personally, specifically, and it was demonstrated while you and I cared less to even look in his direction, did not even have a thought about of following him or not. He loved you dearly, and he continues to love you. This is the God who always was and is gracious and merciful. His grace is what leads you into a new life. His grace is what compels you into the new life, not your own goodness. And so we move on to the next point then, in verse 5, where he says, now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then of all the nations, this is the invitation, of all the nations, you will be my treasured possession. In my notes on the sermon, because we went away from this workshop with quite a lot of notes and really cool PDFs that we could read and reread and try to see how we can bring it on Sunday. One of the titles suggested for this sermon was, Let's Get Married. Let's get married. Now, this is kind of the whole point of 10 Commandments. Let's get married. Let's move in. And here are the rules sort of how we're going to live together. Because in this scene of God giving 10 Commandments is way more like wedding than a courtroom scene. And I think that's our lens, right? That we tend to look at it as laws. And what do we want to do with 10 Commandments? We want to put them like on a courthouse in a public square. God's saying, these are rules for my people. As much as I want the rest of the world to follow the 10 Commandments in the way that God has designed the world to be, he says, would you be my people? And as my people, here are the rules that I give to you, how you will be, so that the rest of the world can see and come to me, and they could also live in the same way. So it's less about courtrooms, and it's much more about a wedding vow, saying I do. This is covenantal language here, where the creator of the universe is saying, you will be my segula in Hebrew, which I don't know if that's how you even say it, but there you go. My treasured possession. My precious people. This is the language of proximity, something personal and dearly valued. He's saying, I want to have a relationship with you, the nation that I just brought out. I want to go a level deeper. I want to develop this relationship. It is said of George Washington that at his deathbed, he was more concerned. I mean, this is a guy who's founded a nation and was a president, fought the wars. He was more concerned with one of his treasured possessions than anything else. It was a locket containing Martha's hair. For him, it wasn't just a locket, though. For him, it was a token of deep personal intimacy, something that meant so much for him, and he carried with him wherever he went. This is kind of the idea, something that in itself, it might not look like it means a lot, but you treasure it and you carry it deeply and close with you. This is an endearing and elevating language, especially in a world where all they knew is that deities and powers of nature, they were so fickle and unpredictable, And here, the creator of the universe longs to have a people who would honor him as a creator and follow him and become like him. This is what he's inviting them into. This was radical. This was mind-blowing for the whole of the world at that time. And Dr. Carmen writes this in her book. The Bible is not alone in using this term to refer to people, the treasured possession. The related ancient languages of Ugaritic and Akkadian, which are all in the Middle East, both employ an equivalent word to refer to someone who enjoys a special status in relation to the king. A covenant partner who is especially treasured and entrusted with greater responsibility. So the second reality, if the first one is grace, remember, I carried you out. I'm the one who did the work and fought the battles. Grace is done. I walked you into freedom. The second reality is an invitation to get married, essentially. Right? Deep covenantal relationship. It's a marriage proposal that God is making for his people, who he will call his bride, who will call his beloved one. 10 commandments are the ground rules of this deep, intimate commitment to live in union with God. These are the ground rules that if we are going to be committed to each other, that I want you to obey and follow. This was God's plan for you and for me as well. To be deeply and exclusively committed to him alone, so that you can thrive and flourish in his presence without the sin or corruption or even your own self competing for the attention or for your life, right? So that he would be the sole focus of your life, and then you can thrive and flourish into who you were meant to be. So God is delivering his proposal here to them, and as you see in verses 7 and 8 in your Bibles, they respond with, I do. Will you marry? I do. Or they say, we do. We will do everything that you say. We're ready to go on. This is a crazy proposal, and we want to be your people. And so the point here is that grace goes before law, all right? And then relationship is the context of the law in which it's presented. And then the law that was given to them had one more reality, and that is that they were called on a mission. And you can see that in the following verse. He says, although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests. Interesting. So a kingdom, a whole nation of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to Israelites. So what God is doing here, he's inviting this liberated group of people to be what Adam and Eve failed to do in the Garden of Eden. He's asking them, learn to obey me. Initially, that's what I wanted them to be. Made in my image so they rule and reign over the earth. And they should take care of the earth and they steward it well. I want you to learn and obey me, to be my image bearers, to represent me. I will be your God and you will be my people. This is what he's presenting here. And then he says, you will be witnesses then to the rest of the world about the goodness of God. That was the heart of 10 Commandments. At least the approach to it, how God is presenting it. They were invited to become this kingdom of priests, this collective as people, mediator. Because the job of a priest is to stand between God and people, between heaven and earth, to be the one who bridges the gap, bridges the two spaces together. And that's where Israel was called to be. And to do that, they were called to embrace a new way of life. You can just walk into that space. It's like, if you're going to be my representatives, if people are going to look at you and through you see me, then you ought to live in a certain way. Embrace this new way of life that would renew you so that you become a faithful representation of the one that you get to serve and the one that you get to show to the world. To be a holy nation also means to be set apart. That's all the word holy means. It's just that, when you dedicate something, you have a special cup that you use or a bottle or whatever. It's set apart for that particular thing and no other. Right? To be set apart for a particular purpose. In this case, to be a holy nation, one that would be set apart from the rest of the world, one that would not be spoiled by sin and corruption, that was God's plan, or by evil. A nation set apart for a special mission. And so God didn't give the 10 Commandments as a way to keep people in or out of heaven, popular to the contrary belief, but as a way to shape Israel into his treasured covenantal partner, who would then, to whom he showed grace and invited them into a relationship and sent them on a mission, gave them a mission to be the people who are going to live representing God into the world, but also ultimately point to Messiah. He's not just handing them out rules, not just listing a bunch of things to now have them more clamped down, But the law was supposed to help deal with a few things, with the past, present, and future. In the past, it's to uproot their fears and distrust. It's to challenge the identity that they were in and to say that although you are liberated, how many know this, right? When you come to know Jesus, your old self doesn't just die all of a sudden and completely disappear from your life. Pete Scazzera has this saying where Jesus lives in my heart, but Grandpa lives in my bones, right? And the point behind it is that no matter, I love Jesus and I want to follow Jesus, but oftentimes who I am and my lineage and the family that I come from and the environment that I grew up in, all of that continues to compete for who I am as a person made in the image of God. And so one, it was meant to deal with their previous identity. It was meant to reshape their previous identity, rewire and heal their slave mentality. Second, the law was supposed to help them shape them in the now by teaching them to obey God and trust God. Because as we've seen, they had a really terrible time trusting God even while he was visibly showing up to them in many ways. And so the second purpose was right now to teach them obedience, to have them learn to live as God's people. And then the law was preparing them, of course, for the future in the promised land. God knows it's going to be 40 years ahead. But for them, right now, they need to go through this preparation. And ultimately, he was preparing them for the coming Messiah, to be the people through whom the Messiah would come to the world. Messiah meaning Jesus Christ, the anointed one, showing up into the world, who would be the final, better, and the perfect Exodus, who would finally lead the whole world into the freedom and renewal. And so then we come to verses 7 through 8. Moses went back up to summon the elders, told them all the words, and the people responded together, "We will do everything that the Lord had said." And so they willingly say yes. And it's interesting. See, there's no why do all the rules? Why do we have to follow this? For them, it's actually good news. The one who has redeemed them is the one that they can trust. That means that if he is giving them a new way of living, especially in comparison to other nations, there's something good. And these then, the rules that he's given them, they become the house rules for the people of God. These are the guidelines for the people on the inside. Now, in a world where godless priests were creating prayers that would protect them, were essentially trying to shoot in the dark, the creator of the universe spoke clearly to them. They don't have to guess. I have a little prayer I want to share with you. I don't know if you guys are interested. I'm running out of time. You guys still good to go? Just full notes? No complaining afterwards. I said could be skipped if time is running out, but I kind of already planned to say this. Here's an example of an ancient prayer written in Akkadian, the language of an ancient Assyria and Babylon, dating rough. Can you please turn on the prayer, Ellie? Don't pray this prayer, by the way. I'm just showing you an example. It dates roughly to the same time as Exodus. It's called Prayer to Any God, and it was very typical of the time. If you don't see it, I'll read it to you. I'm not praying this, just don't cut this out of context. May my Lord's angry heart be reconciled. May the God I do not know be reconciled. May the goddess I do not know be reconciled. May the God, whoever he is, be reconciled, please. May the goddess, whoever she is, be reconciled. Oh my Lord, many are my wrongs and great are my sins. Oh my God, many are my wrongs, great my sins. Oh my goddess, just in case, right? Many are my wrongs and great are my sins. Oh God, whoever you are, many are my wrongs and great are my sins. And then, oh my goddess, same thing. I do not know what wrong I have done. I do not know what sins I have committed. I do not know what abomination I have perpetrated. I do not know what taboo I have violated. The priest who wrote this prayer and suggesting it is just trying out his luck, right? Just trying to cover all the bases out of fear and anguish because gods cannot be trusted. The powers that are moving in the world cannot be predictable. And Dr. Carmen writes in response saying, not so with Israel, because God took the initiative here. He chose them. He rescued them. He established them as his people. And then he told them exactly what he expected. Nothing is off the table. God spoke. No more guesswork. No more wondering what would make him happy or angry. He made it all clear up front. How freeing. Why did the people breathe a sigh of relief over 20 long and boring chapters of laws at Sinai? This is why. Because God spoke, and he spoke clearly, and it was all right there in front of them to take. And that's when the first commandment, the 10 commandments are given, in this context. And I don't know if you know, but 10 is just the introduction to the 613 commandments in the Old Testament. So, it's going to be over the next 20 chapters, then the whole Leviticus, and it's going to be repeated in Deuteronomy, 613 commandments. Well, Dr. Carmen continues, the Old Testament laws related to virtually every facet of Israel's life. Business, agriculture, cooking, diet, dress, worship, governance, relationships, health, even the yearly calendar, because being God's covenant people meant being transformed in all of these areas. The law envisions a different kind of life characterized by self-discipline and self-giving love. These were meant to reorder the lives around a new identity. Identity that is now rooted in God. Identity that's not rooted in the past or where we're at, but the one who led us through it all. It was meant to teach them to obey the one who created them, to trust him, to know him personally, and ultimately become a new humanity in the world. A new humanity that is characterized by respect and honor towards the Creator and others. And so finally, arriving here at the end, we're going to look at 10 commandments very briefly, right, through each one. And I'm using here, again, Dr. Carmen Imes. She studied this extensively. Tim Mackey suggested. In fact, if you go to Bible Project, it's actually her that's teaching the classroom class on Exodus, if you were to watch it online. She's an amazing scholar. So she's this is her sort of work through this. The first one is worship only Yahweh. And she suggests, by the way, there's different numberings of 10 commandments. I don't know if you knew this. Like Catholic versus Protestant versus, I think there's also another denomination that does them a little bit differently. It's because as Joy read today, it's like, was that the first one or the second one? Does this connect to the, like, it's not like God says, this is the first one and this is the second one. And so scholars have to guess and kind of put it in different. The point is, it's 10. And the first one begins with worship only Yahweh, meaning the great I am. Worship only the one who has rescued you. God begins by reminding them that he is the great I am, the one who was and is to come. And he is the one worthy of worship. He is the Alpha and Omega. He is the beginning and the end. And so the first one essentially says that if you're going to be in close relationship with me, if right now you're saying, yes, I want to be married to you, I want to be in this deep covenantal relationship, then you have to be committed to me alone. We can't do this if you're going to be one day with me and another day with somebody else. You have to be committed to me alone. And don't make images of me or other gods. Why? Because you are already created in the image of God. You are my image. You individually, each person, you were created already to reflect my goodness into the world. We already get to carry that God's image and to be a reflection of the Creator. And so worship only Yahweh. And don't look for other images. Don't make other images. Be the image of the one who made you. The second one, represent Yahweh well. Well, what is the second commandment? Usually, let me go with this. As we are made in his image, the next command better be translated, represent his image well. The usual translation is one, not to use God's name in vain. Not to use God's name in vain, which often assumes that, which often we assume it means not to say, oh my God, randomly and just as a phrase, or yell the name of Jesus when you stub your toe, right, instead of a swear word or whatnot. That's what we usually think when it's, when it comes like to not to use the name of the Lord in vain. And people are right to avoid disrespecting God like that. I mean, it's clear, right? You don't use the name of your dad or mom or whoever it may be in your life to just randomly throw in as a cuss word or a filler word. Why would we do that with the one who created us? But proper and contextual meaning of this command is more like this. You must not bear or carry the name of Yahweh your God in vain. For Yahweh will not hold guiltless one who bears or carries. That's the meaning behind it. One who is representing the name of Yahweh God, not to what it means. So the point is, you are God's treasured possession, and the world will watch you. And because they will watch you, represent the God whose name you bear. Represent it well. Don't live in vain. Live like the ones who have been made new. And so the third command then is, remember the Sabbath day. This one is built into the fabric of the universe. You might have remembered that when the manna collection came about, they were asked to pause already on a seventh day and not to collect. They would collect more on Saturday, or in their case, Friday, and not do any work on Saturday for them, the Sabbath day. This one is built into the fabric of the universe. You see it already in the cycle of the 7 days that we are living till this day in the world, right? That there is 7 days and it's just continually going. And God himself rested on the seventh day, demonstrating to us so that we learn to rest as well. So that we take rest. Not that you ought to do that to please God, but this is how you were made to be, so that you take a rest, so that we learn to rest. Many of us, includes me as well, have no idea how to slow down. Have no idea how to chill and take that day and just stop and rest and delight and worship in the one who's got your back. Because he takes your health, and what can you do? Right? And we continue to push through things, and the problem is that eventually will catch up with us. We want to build a good life, and often at the cost of sacrificing our health today. And this one would have been hard for Israelites because they just came out of a place where they were forced to work 7 days a week without a stop. And so for them, it's in their bones to like, well, now we can get a bunch of things done, not for Pharaoh, but for ourselves, right? And they would get right back into working too much. Fourth, honor your father and mother. Especially important for the oral tradition culture, because the continuation of faith is somewhat, as you respect and listen to your elders and you take on what they are passing on to you. Because God's image does not fade with age. And so honor the people who brought you into the world. These are important horizontal relationships. And this one comes with a promise. Number 5, you must not murder. Kind of seems clear for all of us, but it wasn't always, and still till this day, it's not necessarily super clear to a lot of people who choose to go and not treat life as a gift. They knew like no other, no doubt, having lost people to slavery and oppression, that life is a gift and that one should not. And you guys remember Moses murdered somebody too? Yeah, at the very beginning. And he's the one bringing it to them, and they're like, oh, really? That's interesting. I remember. But already you could see grace in it, because the law wasn't something that's like, oh, you've done it, boom, you're chopped right away. It was meant to instruct and to also say there's grace and there's space for healing. Then he goes on to say, I guess last point, revenge and anger are to be checked, or you'll become like your oppressors. That's all I had written for that. Number 6, you must not commit adultery. Marriage is a lifelong union between a husband and a wife. It is sacred. That's all God's just reiterating what he already has created in the Garden of Eden. Sexual intimacy is reserved for the covenant of marriage. They were to remember that the marriage reflects, the marriage in their society reflects the union that they have with God, meaning where each party is committed to each other and no one else. And so the marriage is sacred. It's going to be also speaking of the relationship that we have with you, he says to the people. Make sense? We're good? Number 7, you must not steal. Well, if I end up taking something that's not mine, Dr. Carmen goes on to say, well, ultimately what that suggests is that I lack gratitude and trust for God's provision, right? And what ends up happening is that instead of honoring each other and caring for each other, we shape a community of scarcity instead of a community of abundance and help and support. Number 8, you must not give false testimony. Another pastor said it really well. Slander would eat away at a community like acid. And so we need to be careful about how we talk and protect the dignity of others by speaking honestly about them and to them, right? Because eventually, no matter how good you are at keeping all of the other laws, if you're going to let that eat away at you, your community is going to fall apart. And 9 and 10 are kind of lumped together. 1 is you must not covet your neighbor's house, and 2, you must not covet your neighbor's wife or any other household member. And these, as you could see, are kind of unique to the rest of them, because there is no way to prove that you are doing any of these. Think about it. These stand as unique. And this is where Jesus comes in. I'll get to that in a second. You remember what Jesus said, I didn't come to abolish the law, but came to fulfill it, right? Came to make it what it's all about. Well, here's what he was going at, is that the laws are deeper than just whatever we see on the surface, that it's the heart that matters and how we respond to it. Like, for example, if you are coveting, if you are wanting or craving or desiring another person's car, right? you have no way of telling until you actually go steal it. You steal it, well, then you broke the other commandment, not the coveting one, right? This one all has to do with the heart. Or if you're, you could be wanting another person's wife but not acting on it, again, you haven't really done anything. And this is where Jesus comes in and he corrects and says, you missed the whole point of the law. You remember he's like, yeah, it says don't murder. That's right. But also, he says, if you're harboring hate towards your brother, like where you just can't stand that person and you just want to avoid them by all means, you don't want to even see them exist in your world, all you are is like a murderer who just haven't really made that step to extinguish him out of this life. But you already killed him out of your life, right? You walk with that hate towards them. He says, yes, don't commit adultery, that's right. But let me tell you, the goal was always the heart. And he says this to the teachers of the law and to the Pharisees out there listening and to all the people. I know you follow these laws. I know you've done the 10 Commandments, but let me remind you that the goal was so that you wouldn't harbor lust in your heart. Treating others yes, it wasn't about so that you wouldn't have sex with someone who is not your spouse, but it was more than that so that you wouldn't have a lusting heart that just continually grows you into the wrong direction. And so the question is, what kind of person are you becoming, right? The laws were not so much concerned about keeping score, but the kind of person that you would be formed into. God was never after a clean surface appearance. He wants to bring transformation into your and my life. And so any commands and anything that he brings and the word that he speaks in you quietly, even today, as you think through these, all of these are meant to form us into the kind of people, not to keep some heavenly score, whether you can get into or not into heaven. Jesus challenged the Pharisees who have all the boxes checked. They are the best out there. That was their job. This was their dream, to fulfill all of the law because they hoped that as they do that as a group and as a nation, Messiah would arrive. And yet he challenged them and he said, you guys are like whitewashed tombs. Basically, dude, I don't like the whitewashed. I like the ones, I've been to the museum and seen the Egyptian ones. Those look so cool. Again, pagan stuff, but they look pretty cool. I don't know if you've seen, they're so colorful and they've got all sorts of little images on the outside. I mean, it looks beautiful on the outside, but inside there's a mummy, right? Full of dead bones. And so he challenged them and said, hey, you missed the whole heart of the whole point of it. God's instruction to the people of Israel, or Jesus' teaching to you and me today, are not a burden to carry so that you are loved and protected by God. His teaching is a way for you and me to be shaped in his likeness. Don't miss this. That's what Jesus invites us into, to follow him so that we become more like him. For us to shed our enslaved identity, to leave the patterns of sin behind, and to embrace a new way of living, a deeper relationship, a new mission to heal and thrive and flourish ultimately. Jesus, as you might know, I'm coming to an end. I'm promising you this is, at the end. There you go. Jesus summarized the whole law into 2 statements, if you remember. Like the whole 613, thank you, Jesus. Right? 1, he fulfilled them all. And 2, he took care of the cost on the cross. But he also summarized it in 2 statements. He said, love God with all your heart, with all of your being. Love him. And then love your neighbor as well. At the end, it just seems like, I know that sounds pretty simple, but at the end, that's all it was. Become like him who is love. Right? And I don't mean it in a contemporary sense or in a sometimes messed up sense where it's just love and there's no truth or holiness. Right? Love in the way that God is, both in truth and holiness. I want to close with this. Can you do the last slide? Yeah. Some of us wake up to the idea exactly along this trajectory. So at some point, you have a friend who's like, maybe there is a creator. Maybe there is something more to this world, right? Like this is where they usually begin, where they start to acknowledge that something is more to life than just whatever, the random process that created this whole universe, right? They begin with the whole acknowledging that there is a creator. And then they move into, but for the liberation to occur, they need to come to the next stage, when they finally, at some point, admit and come to the end of themselves that there is something wrong with the way they are. That no matter how good they try, something from within and sometimes from the outside continues to sabotage their thriving, their good life. And that's when they come to a realization that they are enslaved to something. And usually then they start to seek some solutions. And when they come to an end of those solutions, hopefully then they go on to seek Jesus. Because that's when the liberation then happens, right? You need to acknowledge the Creator. You need to acknowledge that you are enslaved. And as you come to Him, He is the one who saves you and liberates you. But here's the problem. Some of us get stuck in this, in between liberation and renewal. Right? Because we enjoy the idea that God has saved us and that my future is secured with Him. We enjoy that. But the renewal part of us becoming a people that are like Him, of us learning to obey Him, of us starting to follow Him, that's hard. And in part is because it requires trust. It means that I need to stop now deciding for myself what is good and what is evil, and I need to trust the one who made me. It also means I need to stop finding excuses as to why I haven't stepped into the new life. Yes, I've been liberating, but why do I not live in the way that He has called me to? And so stop those excuses. We need to stop those excuses and surrender to His way of living. It also means that I need to let Him deal with the Egypt that is still inside of me, that is not going anywhere until I bring attention and invite the Holy Spirit to root it out of me, the fears, the pride, the lust, the anger, the old mentality of living in sin, the need to control. As I close, I will be inviting you to a moment of prayer here. But also I want you to listen to what the Holy Spirit speaks to you in this moment. But to close, I want to say this. Remember that God's love and grace came before His invitation to live a holy life. Just remember that always, because you don't need to earn your belovedness. You are already deeply loved by Him before you could ever show up and do anything for Him. And anything that you do is in no way earning your salvation or your freedom. If anything, it's just our response of gratitude to the one who saved us and rescued us. And if you haven't been liberated, but struggle to make that, or if you haven't been liberated, the invitation is to come and find the one who has that freedom for you. Because His ultimate goal is not to just have us be the good Christians on this side and then all of the others who don't listen on the other, although that is going to come to that. The point is so that we become the kind of people that invite as much as possible into this new future that He's creating. That is the purpose of the law. That was the purpose of the 10 Commandments and all the other laws, so they become like Him. And ultimately, that is the purpose of Jesus' teaching, so that we become like Him.